Understanding systemic racism in society. Systemic racism refers to the deeply embedded practices, policies, and norms that result in unequal treatment of individuals based on their race. It goes beyond personal biases, affecting societal institutions such as education, healthcare, and the criminal justice system. This form of racism is ingrained in laws, practices, and structures that perpetuate racial inequality. The impact of systemic racism on education. Systemic racism has a profound effect on the education system. It results in disparities in school funding, access to quality teachers, curriculum choices, and educational opportunities. Minority students, particularly Black and Hispanic children, often face these disparities, which can hinder their academic success and future opportunities. Unequal school funding and resources. One of the main manifestations of systemic racism in education is the unequal funding of schools. Schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods often receive less funding due to property taxes being a primary source of school revenue. As a result, students in these areas may attend schools with outdated materials, larger class sizes, and fewer extracurricular opportunities. Racial disparities in discipline. Racial disparities in school discipline are another example of systemic racism. Studies show that students of color, particularly Black students, are more likely to be suspended or expelled compared to their white peers for similar infractions. This can lead to higher dropout rates and a school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately affects minority communities. Access to advanced educational opportunities. Systemic racism also affects access to advanced educational opportunities. Minority students are less likely to be placed in advanced placement (AP) classes, gifted programs, or college preparatory tracks due to factors such as lower expectations and biased assessments. This limits their access to higher education and professional career paths. Teacher bias and representation. Another aspect of systemic racism in education is teacher bias. Educators, often unconsciously, may hold lower expectations for students of color or apply different standards of behavior management. Additionally, the lack of diverse representation in teaching staff and curriculum content can impact students' sense of belonging and academic achievement. Disparities in access to technology. The digital divide is a significant challenge in addressing systemic racism in education. Minority students are more likely to lack access to high-speed internet, laptops, and other digital tools, limiting their ability to engage with online learning and educational resources. This has become even more evident during the COVID-19 pandemic when remote learning became a necessity. The role of implicit bias in education. Implicit bias, or unconscious attitudes toward different racial groups, plays a significant role in perpetuating systemic racism in education. Teachers and administrators may unknowingly favor white students over students of color, which can affect academic outcomes and opportunities for minority students. Training on implicit bias is essential to mitigating these effects. Legal and policy reforms to combat systemic racism. Addressing systemic racism in education requires changes at both the policy and institutional levels. Reforms such as equitable funding for schools, diversifying the teaching workforce, revising disciplinary practices, and ensuring equal access to advanced education opportunities can help dismantle systemic barriers. The path toward educational equity. Educational equity means ensuring that all students, regardless of race, have access to the resources, opportunities, and support they need to succeed. Combating systemic racism in education requires a collective effort from educators, policymakers, and communities to create an inclusive system that provides equal opportunities for every student.